Welcome! Today, we're diving into the essentials of what makes a lease legally binding. Whether you're a landlord or a tenant, understanding the legal framework behind leases is crucial. A lease isn't just a piece of paper, it's a formal agreement that sets out the rights and responsibilities of both parties. But what exactly transforms a simple agreement into a legally enforceable contract? Let's break down the key elements, step by step, so you can confidently navigate your next rental agreement. A lease is a legally binding contract between a landlord and a tenant. It outlines the terms under which the tenant can occupy and use the property. This agreement typically includes details like the duration of the lease, the amount of rent, and the responsibilities of both parties. The lease serves as a reference point in case of disputes, ensuring that both sides understand their obligations and rights. Without a proper lease, misunderstandings can easily arise, leading to potential legal issues down the road. While some verbal agreements can be legally binding, most jurisdictions require leases longer than a year to be in writing. A written lease provides clear evidence of the agreed terms and helps prevent disputes. It also ensures that both parties are on the same page regarding the expectations and obligations involved. Having everything in writing protects both the landlord and the tenant, making it easier to enforce the agreement if any issues arise during the tenancy. For a lease to be legally binding, there must be a clear offer and acceptance. This means one party proposes the terms such as rent amount, duration, and property rules, and the other party agrees to those terms. Both sides must willingly consent to the agreement without any form of coercion or misunderstanding. This mutual understanding forms the foundation of any enforceable contract, including leases. Consideration is a legal term that refers to something of value exchanged between the parties. In the context of a lease, this usually means the tenant pays rent in exchange for the right to occupy the property. Without consideration, a lease cannot be legally binding. Both parties must benefit in some way. This exchange is what makes the contract enforceable in court. Both the landlord and the tenant must have the legal capacity to enter into a contract. This means they must be of legal age and mentally competent. For example, minors or individuals declared legally incompetent cannot create a binding lease. Ensuring both parties have capacity protects the integrity of the agreement and prevents future legal challenges. A lease must have a lawful purpose to be enforceable. This means the property cannot be rented for illegal activities. If a lease is created for an unlawful purpose, such as operating an unlicensed business or illegal activity, it is not legally binding. Both parties must ensure that the intended use of the property complies with local laws and regulations. A legally binding lease must include certain essential terms. These typically cover the names of the landlord and tenant, the property address, the duration of the lease, the amount of rent, and payment terms. Without these details, the lease may be considered incomplete and unenforceable. Always double-check that all critical information is included before signing. For a lease to be legally binding, it must be signed by both the landlord and the tenant. Signatures indicate that both parties agree to the terms and intend to be bound by the contract. In some cases, witnesses or notarization may be required, depending on local laws. Always ensure that all required signatures are present before considering the lease official. After signing, the lease must be delivered to both parties. Delivery means that each side receives a copy of the signed agreement. This step is crucial because it confirms that both the landlord and tenant are aware of and agree to the terms. Without proper delivery, the lease may not be enforceable in court. It's important for both parties to fully understand the terms of the lease before signing. This includes rent amount, due dates, maintenance responsibilities, and any restrictions on property use. Taking the time to review and clarify any unclear terms can prevent misunderstandings and disputes later on. Sometimes, changes need to be made to a lease after it's been signed. These modifications should always be documented in writing and signed by both parties. Addendums are official additions to the original lease, and they become part of the legally binding agreement. Never rely on verbal changes, always put everything in writing. Leases can be renewed or extended if both parties agree. Like modifications, renewals and extensions should be in writing and signed by both the landlord and tenant. This ensures that the new terms are clear and enforceable. Always avoid relying on informal agreements when it comes to extending a lease. A legally binding lease should include clear termination clauses. These outline the conditions under which the lease can be ended by either party, such as non-payment of rent or violation of lease terms. Understanding these clauses helps both landlords and tenants know their rights and responsibilities if the lease needs to be terminated early. Most leases require a security deposit, which is held by the landlord as protection against damages or unpaid rent. The lease should specify the amount, conditions for return, and any deductions that may be made. Security deposit terms must comply with local laws to be enforceable. A binding lease should clearly state who is responsible for maintenance and repairs. This includes routine upkeep, emergency repairs, and responsibilities for damages. Clear maintenance clauses help avoid disputes and ensure the property remains in good condition throughout the tenancy. The lease should specify how, when, and where rent is to be paid. This includes acceptable payment methods, due dates, and any late fees. Clear payment terms help both parties avoid misunderstandings and ensure timely rent collection. Leases often include rules and restrictions, such as pet policies, noise limits, and guest policies. These rules must be reasonable and clearly stated in the lease. Both parties should review these clauses to ensure they are fair and enforceable. A binding lease should outline what happens if either party defaults on their obligations. This includes the steps the non-defaulting party can take, such as eviction or legal action. Clear default and remedy clauses protect both sides and provide a roadmap for resolving issues. Every lease should specify which state or local laws govern the agreement. This is important because landlord-tenant laws can vary widely by location. Including a governing law clause ensures that both parties know which rules apply if a dispute arises. A severability clause states that if one part of the lease is found to be invalid or unenforceable, the rest of the agreement remains in effect. This protects both parties by ensuring that a single problematic clause doesn't void the entire lease. An entire agreement clause confirms that the written lease represents the full understanding between the landlord and tenant. This means that any previous verbal or written agreements not included in the lease are not legally binding. It helps prevent disputes over side agreements or misunderstandings. Leases often specify how and when notices must be given, such as for ending the lease or reporting repairs. Notice requirements ensure that both parties communicate important information in a timely and documented manner. Following these procedures is essential for upholding the lease's terms. A lease should state whether subletting or assigning the lease to another party is allowed. These clauses protect the landlord's interests and clarify the tenant's rights. If subletting is permitted, the lease should outline the process and any required approvals. Some leases require tenants to carry renter's insurance. This protects both the tenant's belongings and the landlord's property. The lease should specify any insurance requirements and the consequences of not maintaining coverage. A binding lease may include a dispute resolution clause outlining how disagreements will be handled. This could involve mediation, arbitration, or court proceedings. Having a clear process in place can save time and money if conflicts arise. A waiver clause states that if one party fails to enforce a lease term, it does not mean they waive their right to enforce it later. This protects both parties and ensures that rights under the lease are preserved even if not immediately exercised. If changes need to be made to the lease, the amendment procedure should be followed. This usually requires written agreement and signatures from both parties. Following proper procedures ensures that amendments are legally binding and enforceable. Leases must comply with fair housing laws, which prohibit discrimination based on race, religion, gender, or other protected characteristics. Including a non-discrimination clause reinforces the commitment to equal treatment and helps ensure the lease is legally compliant. A lease is only binding if the property meets basic habitability standards. This means the rental must be safe, clean, and fit for living. Landlords are typically required by law to maintain these standards, and tenants have the right to a habitable home. Landlords are often required to disclose certain information, such as lead paint hazards or recent repairs. Failing to provide required disclosures can make a lease unenforceable. Always check local laws to ensure all necessary disclosures are included. Some lease terms may be illegal, such as waiving the right to a habitable home or allowing discrimination. Including illegal provisions can make the entire lease unenforceable. Always review the lease to ensure all terms comply with the law. Once a lease is legally binding, both parties are obligated to follow its terms. If either side fails to meet their obligations, the other party can seek enforcement through legal channels. Courts will generally uphold leases that meet all legal requirements. A lease may be void if it lacks essential elements or includes illegal terms. Voidable leases are those that can be canceled by one party due to issues like fraud or misrepresentation. Understanding the difference helps both landlords and tenants protect their rights. The statute of frauds is a legal principle that requires certain contracts, including leases, longer than a year, to be in writing. This law helps prevent fraud and ensures that important agreements are documented. Always check if your lease falls under the statute of frauds in your jurisdiction. In many places, electronic signatures are just as valid as handwritten ones for leases. This makes it easier to sign and deliver leases, especially when parties are in different locations. Always ensure that electronic signatures comply with local laws. Some leases require witnesses to the signatures, especially for longer-term agreements. Witnesses help verify that both parties willingly sign the lease. Check local requirements to see if witnesses are necessary for your lease to be binding. Notarization is sometimes required for leases, especially for longer terms or certain jurisdictions. A notary public verifies the identities of the signers and ensures the agreement is entered into voluntarily. Notarization adds an extra layer of legal protection. Even if not stated in the lease, some terms are implied by law. For example, the landlord's duty to provide a habitable home or the tenant's duty to pay rent. These implied terms are automatically part of every lease and are enforceable in court. While oral leases can be legally binding for short-term rentals, written leases are always preferable. Written agreements provide clear evidence of the terms and are easier to enforce. For leases longer than a year, writing is usually required by law. If a dispute arises, courts will look at whether the lease meets all legal requirements. A lease that is complete, clear, and complies with the law is most likely to be enforced. Always keep a signed copy of your lease for reference in case of legal action. Disputes can arise over issues like unpaid rent, property damage, or early termination. Having a clear, legally binding lease helps resolve these disputes quickly and fairly. Always refer to the lease terms when disagreements occur. If you're unsure about any aspect of your lease, it's wise to seek legal advice. Lawyers can review the lease, explain your rights, and help you avoid potential pitfalls. Getting professional guidance can save time, money, and stress in the long run. To sum up, a legally binding lease requires clear terms, mutual agreement, consideration, capacity, lawful purpose, and proper execution. Always ensure your lease is in writing, signed, and complies with local laws. Taking these steps protects both landlords and tenants and helps create a smooth rental experience. Understanding what makes a lease legally binding is essential for both landlords and tenants. By ensuring all legal requirements are met, you can avoid disputes and enjoy a secure rental relationship. Remember, a well-drafted lease is the foundation of a successful tenancy.